Hi, everyone. It's Kim Allen from the Releading Podcast, where you can be a releader and also a re-engager. Remember, everything that I do always comes under the umbrella of leadership effectiveness. And the reason why is because what I want everyone to do is to be able to pause and see where you are, have high self-awareness, and then pivot. But make sure you're pivoting, okay? You don't want to pause and keep going straight. You need to pivot and move forward and proceed, but do it with purpose, all right? That's really how you're going to be getting ahead in that career journey. You don't want to stay on that straight line, okay? So I'm so excited today because, first of all, we have our guest, Jeff Sigel. Hi, Jeff. How are you doing today?
I'm doing great. Thanks for having me, Kim.
He is great, everyone. And I say that with full confidence. What I want to do is talk to Jeff in a second about a lot of things. But first, we're going to have a little bit of fun. And even prior to that, I'm going to introduce Greg. Greg, I can't believe I said that. Should I start over again?
No, you're good. Let's just keep going. Yeah.
I said Greg because I also wanted to say up front that Jeff is going to come back for another podcast with Greg Kaiser Sr., who the three of us are authors. And I wanted to properly introduce my friend, Jeff Sigel. So, Jeff, I'm going to have you sit back, and everyone else, I want you to, if you're watching this or if you're listening to this, take note of who my friend Jeff is. First of all, what I want Jeff to do is hold up a picture of his brand new book, which is called The Middle Matters. And it is selling like hotcakes, as it should, for a lot of reasons. Okay, we're going to talk about that in detail. But first, let me introduce the background of Jeff. What I like to do for everyone in my podcast is to give everyone a point of reference. Why are we talking to Jeff Sigel? Why is it important right now to talk to Jeff Sigel? What's going to be happening down the road? What is it that he's going to say that's going to change us in a way that can help us professionally and personally? So once we have this point of reference, I think you're going to understand how great this conversation is going to be. So first of all, Jeff is an author. He's a coach and he's a consultant. Reading actually his bio because I couldn't memorize this. He's passionate about creating better work environments and more fulfilling careers for middle managers everywhere. I have his resume I'm going to refer to in a second too because it's crazy great. After 20 years of corporate experience at Nabisco, the Hershey Company, grocery retailer, is it Ahold? Ahold. And the restaurant company Cracker Barrel, Jeff has shifted his focus to coaching mid-level leaders and supporting companies looking to empower their middle management teams. He is currently principal consultant for the name of the company, Jeff?
Proprioceptive.
Okay, so I've tried that for like a half hour and I can't say it as great as he can. It's a consultancy focused on turning strategy into actions by developing middle management excellence. His book, The Middle Manners, a tool book, which is really important that you know it's a resource for middle managers, is available on Amazon. All right, so before we go any further, so anyone who's not looking, all right, if you're listening to this, I'm holding up Jeff's resume. And I feel like re-enrolling kindergarten, which I may have to do that. Okay, so first of all, let me start with his academic career. You fastening your seatbelt for this? I really feel like I need to re-enroll kindergarten. Okay, so Jeff has a bachelor's of arts in chemistry and physics. I don't even know how to spell physics. Is that what the name? Okay.
I don't remember.
Magna cum laude. All right. He also has a master's of art in Spanish language and literature. The first one was from Harvard. Second is from Middlebury College, master's of art. And then he has an MBA from Simon School of Business and Administration, University of Rochester. It keeps going. In addition to that, his teaching experience, University of Rochester, he was a teaching assistant in statistics, everyone. What? Who does that? Okay. The Hill School, which I'm familiar with that. It's in Pottstown. It's a private, well-known school. He's a physics teacher. The Buxton School in Williamstown, Massachusetts, as a math and physics teacher. Are you sitting for this one, everyone? He was a teaching assistant at Harvard for organic chemistry. Who does that? Okay. All right. Okay. Now, getting back to his resume, what I see Again, he's the principal consultant of his own company right now. He was vice president of corporate strategy and business intelligence for Cracker Barrel. He was vice president marketing, acting CMO, direct report to CEO.
Also, Cracker Barrel.
Got that. Okay. I'm turning the page. It's 2 pages long, single spaced, really.
The long.
He was vice president brand marketing at brand and marketing planning at Ahold. He was the Hershey Company senior director, sweets and refreshments business unit. So do I have you to blame for all that Hershey stuff that I've had?
No, but I like to say that my favorite title that my kids of mine that my kids, would say is the best title I've ever had is when I was the director of Twizzlers and Jolly Ranchers. Like that.
Oh my gosh.
That's like a cool thing to have on your business card.
It is so cool. And I got to tell you this because I used to be a pharmaceutical rep. People that know me know that from 100 years ago. And I was out in Lancaster County and I was taking these back roads. And in the middle of nowhere, everyone, okay, was a Twizzler factory.
Yeah.
Right? It screamed my name. I pulled up, went in, okay. And you know what they had on their counter? Fresh Twizzlers, hot off the press. You will never eat another Twizzlers in a package again if you ever had a fresh one off the press. So, go ahead.
Well, and so, and then before I was at the Hershey Company, I worked at Nabisco. And of course, even better is having a fresh, hot Oreo cookie. I mean, that is cool.
I love you so much, my new friend, Jeff, but suddenly I hate you. A hot, fresh Oreo. Okay. When I'm in my casket, just put some in my casket with me, okay? So I can take that into my next life with me. Oh my gosh, that's unbelievable. Okay, so it is so important that I talked about his academic background because we're going to get to the discussion in a second, all right? But now that we have this point of reference, exactly how large Jeff's brain is, okay? Yeah, I mean, I love it. Okay, so, but we are going to have some fun first, okay? Well, first of all, before we have fun, we're going to ask you 2 other questions because now we know all this information about Jeff and we haven't even gotten to the fun part yet. So I have 2 questions. I'm going to ask them to you. All right. So the first question is, what is something that's nice to know about Jeff Sigel? And what's something that we need to know about Jeff Sigel?
All right. Well, nice to, I got to give props to, you've met my twin brother, Eric. So I think a nice to know is that I have a twin brother who's sort of like my go do it guy, right? He's just like, he was like, Jeff, we should start a podcast, or Jeff, you should publish your book or whatever. And so that's sort of a nice to know that I have this, sort of twin brother kind of angel / devil on the shoulder, kind of always giving me a nice push. And so that's my nice to know. So what do you need to know about me? I guess I'll go back to something you said in my bio, which is I really, I've spent so many years in corporate environments, and I know the frustration that people feel of just trying to interpret and figure out what is going on. And I've had that experience myself, and I am very, very much focused on this idea of how do you help people be sort of, take charge of their own lives, right? I mean, there's a lot in the corporate environment that you can't control. And so how do you focus on the things that you can? And that's really what I am passionate about. So that's the thing I think you need to know about me. So.
Okay. So everyone who's watching and listening, I've met Eric and they're both fabulous. They're so great. I sometimes can't tell them apart. And I do believe that Eric has a beard.
Eric has a beard, yes.
Yeah, and if he shaved it, I would just be guessing who I was talking to.
I think if he shaved it, I wouldn't know the difference either.
I love that. Okay, so, all right. So the fun questions are this. Don't think about it, okay? First concert, best concert.
All right. So first concert, I think was I might have the group wrong, but what I remember is we were at my family, my parents, my twin brother and I were at somewhere in like Western New York, at like some kind of state fair, and there was a concert happening at the state fair, and I am pretty sure it was the Four Tops. Like,
Wow.
yeah. And I could be wrong about this. I mean, it's definitely a Motown group, but it was just like such a, kind of weird, kind of coincidental thing that it's like stuck in my brain, but I can't remember if I'm pretty sure it was the Four Tops because so anyway, that's I think was my first concert.
Okay.
My best concert. So I am a huge Brandi Carlile fan. Do you know Brandi Carlile? Are you familiar?
Yes.
Seeing Brandi Carlile. First of all, I actually met Brandi Carlile when I was working at Cracker Barrel. We did a really cool program about women in country music, and she actually gave me a hug and thanked me for for doing this cool program about supporting women in country music. So maybe the best concert I've ever been to was we were literally waiting to go in to do her recording, and she was standing outside and just playing. I think it was I don't remember what song it was, but it was this, she's just sitting there like sort of riffing and improvising and whatever. It was pretty amazing. But probably the best concert that I've been to was when I saw her at the Ryman Theater in Nashville. It's pretty cool.
Wow, that is so great. Oh, I love that. And I love your first concert because I just paid a lot of money to see the Four Tops and the Temptations. What?
This was like a long time. This is why I'm not sure. This is why I'm not 100% sure that I have this memory correct. That it was the Four Tops, because it seems strange that they would have just been like at some random, state fair in New York. But whatever, that's what I remember. So
that's great. Well, again, I tell everyone on my podcast, music is always an equalizer, and we always find out a little bit more fun. I think it's fun information because again, you've got this like gigantic brain, like Harvard, and we're going to talk about you. So I actually wrote this down. I'm going to read this for my audience because I put okay, we're going to begin our questions now, but I want to say this about my new friend, Jeff. And he's not a new friend anymore. He's a friend. Okay. Jeff and I met while in a master's writing circle class. He's wicked smart. See, he's from the Boston area, and I spent a lot of time working in Boston. And I'm a Philly girl, so I love Boston people because we're so much alike, except you talk much cooler than we do. He's wicked smart, right? He's a gentleman. And I'm looking in the camera when I say this. That is how I judge people. Okay, I don't care what your degree is, what your title is, where you came from. If you're a gentleman or a gentlewoman, if you will, okay, or we're in that range, if you know what I'm talking about. That's how I judge people. He's so generous with information and resources to advance others. In the writing class, Jeff was the most outspoken with helping everyone in the group, telling us things, holding up books. I mean, this man is a walking internet. That is pretty much all you need to know about him as a human being, right? Because we know about his accomplishments. So speaking of that, all right. Excuse me. Okay, so I have so many questions, and everyone listening and watching, if we go over the 30-minute mark, stay on, okay? Because I'm telling you, you're going to hear some great stuff today. Okay, so my first thought, these are thoughts and questions, all right? So you have an academic background steeped in chemistry and physics and math, and you were a teacher in all the above. Jeff, how did you cross over to the business world?
Yeah, so that's a great question. So how I crossed over was, when you're first starting out, you graduate college. I don't know, I don't know if other people had this experience. I certainly had this experience. Like, I had all these ideas of what I wanted to do that were maybe not in line with like who I really am. Like things that sounded interesting to me or whatever. And so I thought I wanted to be a high school teacher. And I am glad that I was a high school teacher for 4 years because that's how I met my wife. But I taught at two different boarding schools. One was this boarding school in Western Massachusetts that was called a progressive school, didn't really have a lot of rules, kind of very loose, kind of learned some things about myself, one of which was I actually like structure. And the other, so then I went to the Hill School, which is quite the opposite. And I think the Hill School was actually the basis of the school in the Dead Poets Society. But at the time that I was there, it was still an all boys boarding school, jacket and tie, much more structured, and sort of and really sort of realized when I was there that I did like the structure. What I found was like I always joke that I'm the kind of person that likes to put something, like to have something to put up on the refrigerator at the end of the day, like, here I did something, this is what I accomplished or whatever. And the problem I found with teaching was that, every year you were kind of like, oh, I'm going to teach this, subject, and now I'm going to teach it again and again. And it just wasn't enough sort of, kind of innovation, new thinking, whatever. The pace was, I guess, just not right for me. But I loved teaching, so I will come back to that in a second. But and so my transition was that I got married, and my wife so I was living in Pottstown, Pennsylvania. My wife was living in DC. If you've ever been to Pottstown, Pennsylvania, and or DC, you will know that DC was the better choice.
There's nothing in Pottstown.
No offense to Pottstown, but
nice people.
It's very nice people. But I always used to joke, as like somebody dropped a city block of Philadelphia in the middle of Amish country. It's a little bit like
that's true.
But anyway, but so I moved down to Washington D.C., and so I was a little bit at a crossroads of I need to find a job, and so I was literally applying for jobs, and I got a job through a newspaper listing. That's how old I am.
He's not old, everyone. He's still an embryo. Keep going.
Well, and even then, that was kind of outdated. But anyway, I applied for this job working for a marketing consulting company, and that was absolutely, Kim, the worst job I've ever had. I mean, I had no idea what I was in for. The boss was kind of a screamer. He would yell. He had totally unrealistic expectations. Like one day, one of my favorite recollections, and I think I tell this story in the book, was he literally is like screaming at the admin on a Friday evening because he wants us to set up Norwegian focus groups. I mean, like in Norway by Monday. I mean, like just whatever came into his head, he would just tell us to do it. It just created a lot of anxiety for me or whatever. And I actually wish I had my book back then, because if I had read my book, I think I would have, kind of known, better what to do. But, he was actually, interestingly, I tell this story, and it's, it's amusing now, but whatever. But he was actually the person that got me interested in marketing. I remember walking down K Street in DC with him, and he is literally pointing at, like, he's like, do you see that flag there? Somebody had to market that. You see those bricks there, in that building? Like, somebody had to market that. And I was like, wow, this is something that I have never thought of. I mean, I was a chemistry and physics major. I just didn't even know. I mean, I guess if you'd asked me about marketing, I would have said something about advertising, whatever. And so I ended up thinking, well, I'm going to go back to business school. And so I went off to business school and studied, the usual stuff, but got really interested in marketing and ended up getting an internship at Nabisco. And in Nabisco, like most consumer packaged goods companies, uses a brand management system. And so I got into sort of the brand management world and ended up back there the next year, after I graduated, as the associate brand manager on Ritz crackers. And so then I worked on Ritz, Oreo, and so forth. And then that was kind of how my career progressed. So it was a little bit like, I think, a lot of people's careers, in that it was, there was a lot of sort of accidental, like, here's what, things, and, discovered, interesting things that interested me and so forth. So that's how I made that transition. I will just say one thing is the teaching thing has always sort of stuck with me. I love teaching, coaching, mentoring. I think because of that, those are roots as a teacher. So that's...
Well, I mean, that shines through. And that's the first thing I noticed about you in our writing class. I think that it's your sixth sense, if you will, that you're just so generous and forthcoming with information in order to help other people. Again, is that generosity that I know a common acquaintance that Jeff and I have is Becky Robinson, and I don't have her book in front of me. Becky, I'm holding up your book. Okay, if anyone here is thinking about publishing, you must get this book. This is the one that changed my life. Yeah. But then again, so has my book, Reengage. But anyway, so hey, once a marketer, always a marketer.
I'll put my book up too, then.
Jeff's book is so fantastic. You have to buy his book, and we're going to talk about that in like 2 questions away. But I just have to, I'm looking at your background, and I don't speak science. I never had good science teachers. And I mean, the best I get is, the knee bone's connected to the ankle bone, which is not. But, that's why, and it's weird that I was in pharmaceutical sales because I didn't understand science. But I was actually a food marketing major at St. Joe's. Mm-hmm. We had to invent products back then, like in that school, if you will. Oh my gosh, light beer, peanut butter and jelly in the same jar, like so many products. But my product I invented is on the market. Cheese flavored potato chips. Oh, yeah. Well, yeah, that and $1 won't even give me a cup of coffee. But anyway, okay. So, so you had a very long career, and everyone, he's young. Don't let him fool you. But in that time, this is the power of having a large brain like Jeff does. In your long career in senior leadership, you've been in a lot of vice president roles. Mm-hmm. So I'm going to just transition right now because again, this is my thought process. So, because I understand your background, I know your heart at this point, I know everything, but during that time, did you notice during that time in these higher level positions that middle managers were not the focus of development or leadership development? Did you notice it back then?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, it's 100. I mean, for me, I just remember becoming a middle manager. So I like to think about middle manager like from the day you have a direct report until the day you're on like the executive team or whatever, you're basically middle manager. And I would argue that there are some things that even executive team members and CEOs, at least everybody has a boss, right? You still have a boss, but I like to focus sort of on that, sort of everything from manager up through sort of like, the kind of VP, level folks are in the middle. And what I find is that people are essentially, we spend tons of time training people and helping people learn how to be good at what they do, meaning accounting, data engineering, marketing, whatever. Mm-hmm. HR or whatever, we train people how to do. What we don't train them how to do is how to lead a team, and we don't train them how to sort of navigate the influencing the organization. Those things that we called soft skills, we act like they're sort of like, oh, even the name soft skills sort of implies like, oh, those are just sort of an aside. But the reality is, and this, from all of your experiences, those soft skills are the job.
It's our future.
And so many people view that as some kind of sideshow. In fact, Eric, my brother, who we were talking about, was not long ago was on the phone with somebody who used to work for him and now is off in some other company, whatever. And this person was saying, "Oh, I love my new job. I just don't like the people stuff." And it's like, no, your new job is the people stuff. The people stuff is the whole thing. And in fact, and so to your question is, I find that most people end up in these sort of middle management roles and they are underprepared for the job, not because they don't know how to do accounting or marketing, but because they don't know how to do the things that are their real job now, leading, influencing, et cetera. And until organizations start to recognize that those skills are actually things that are important to train and B, trainable, we're going to continue to run. I don't know if you've been noticing all these articles, Kim, about like the great unbossing or like how they're firing all the middle managers. And I think this is nothing new. I've seen this happen multiple times over the course of my career where, they get rid of the middle layer because they decide that the middle folks don't know, what they're doing. And it's really it's just the wrong way of looking at it. You actually need to train the middle folks.
Agreed.
as opposed to ignoring them.
Right. So, I mean, my first book was called Relead, and that's all about leadership effectiveness. And my second book is called Reengage, which is all about intentional engagement effectiveness, right? So the common word is effectiveness. Middle managers are not trained to be effective, because once you become effective, that's when you get promoted. So that's really what this gap is. That's where, again, I mean, and you so beautifully identified this. So, okay.
Hey, Kim, I hate to do this, but there is an ant. One of my pets is making like a moaning noise outside. Give me 1 second, and I really apologize.
I understand this.
I do not know what that was about, but I guess hopefully we're okay.
But it's real life. We work from home now, and children and pets. Hey, I'm just happy that you don't have a cat sitting in front of the camera the whole time, because that's in my book. All right.
Yeah, well, I purposely, like, I'm in a special room where there's no animals in here, whatever. And there's like a dog like freaking out outside.
It's okay. I'm a dog lover. What kind of dog is it?
We have a small menagerie of pets here. We have 2 cats, and then we have a beagle, and then what we believe is a beagle German Shepherd mix.
Wow. Yeah. Okay. You have a lot. All right.
It's a lot.
Okay. So we're talking about all this with middle management. And again, I'm starting to really become crystallized on where you're going with this, because I agree with you completely. But what I love about your focus is middle management, because my focus is on leaders. Okay. And there's still, just because you're a leader, there's still a range, entry level leader, the highest level leadership. And you're focused on, a sector of that, which I think is important. So at what point did you decide to write a book about this?
Yeah. So this is like a multi-part answer on this one. So the first thing was, I started writing during the pandemic when everyone else was quilting and making sourdough. So
I wasn't doing that, but keep going.
So you were writing too. So I started writing, and I actually wrote 2 novels, which I have not published. And I don't know if I'll ever publish them.
What don't you do? Why don't we spend the rest of the podcast? What doesn't Jeff Sigel do? All right, keep going.
Anyway, so I wrote these 2 novels, and then and I didn't publish them or whatever. So that was part number 1. Part number 2 was, I at some point, and this happened in other companies too, but at Cracker Barrel in particular, I became one of the non-HR, like, go-to people who wasn't in HR to do presentations to middle managers on how to manage your team, how to build trust with your team, how to leverage strategy in your day-to-day work, just things like that. And so they would come to me and say, "Hey, can you do a presentation? Because otherwise everybody else is going to be HR people." And so whatever. And so I would come and do these presentations, and I really enjoyed this topic. And what I was finding was that a lot of the time, the things that, these were generally 2 people in middle management roles. And what I was finding was that a lot of the time, the middle managers are, not the things that they don't know and they haven't been trained on are really pretty straightforward things that if somebody just told them, they would know. And so, like, my favorite one is, have one-on-ones with your people, and I can't tell you how many times I, would give a presentation and say, "Hey, it's really important to have one-on-ones with your people." And people would come up to me, the next week and be like, "Hey, Jeff, that was a great presentation. I set up one-on-ones with my people." I'm like, "Okay, great. Like, why were you doing that?"
Right.
But just little things that just sort of, or even just letting people know that leadership is your job now, and doing leadership things is not a waste of your time or some kind of sideshow of what you're supposed to be doing. And so that's so between those 2 things, when I decided I was going to leave my corporate career behind last fall, the first thing, I'm like one of those people who just has to be doing something all the time.
Right.
So I left my job and literally was like, I'm going to write 1,000 words a day. And so I just sat down every morning and wrote 1,000 words. And I mean, a leadership book is probably somewhere around 35,000 to 55,000 words. So about, I don't know, 6 weeks I had a book. And then kind of went through the process. It was much hard. I don't know if you would agree with this as a fellow author, but I actually found the editing process much more difficult than the writing process. I really enjoyed I mean, I could just crank out the writing, whatever. It was the afterwards trying to make it work and making the stories really polished and feel detailed and that people could connect with it. But that was my experience. So.
Yeah, I mirror how you feel about writing. I love writing, and when you get to the editing part, when you get to the publishing part too,
Yeah, well,
that's another podcast, right? Okay.
Yeah.
So I understand why. First of all, I love the artwork on the cover of your book. I love the title of the book. And I understand why you chose that. So I have a question. It's two-part. How do you think your book will change leaders, and how do you think your book can change organizations?
Yeah. So I think in terms of leaders, let me talk first about the middle leaders. My hope is that this book will get in the hands of lots of middle managers, middle leaders, because it really is about, I call it a toolkit for middle managers is the subtitle. It really is about giving very specific tools to middle managers that will help them make their job easier.
Right.
It's not about this is not some sort of esoteric view of like what some sort of theory or whatever. This is like literally practical things that help you understand, how do I manage up better in order to create credibility with my manager? How do I manage my team better so I can get more capacity, get more things done? And how do I influence the people around me so I can get commitment to the ideas that I have? And that's really what the book is sort of about on its face. But to your second question, which is how does it change organizations? Like, my hope is that if you could get a whole organization to really train their middle folks, that you would actually see, if everybody had sort of learned the sort of managing up skills, how to make sure they're credible, like, does the whole organization get buoyed and feel much more credible to the people that the organization is beholden to, like Wall Street or the investors or whatever, are like, oh, well, we know when this company says that they're going to get something done, that they're going to get it done. Or we know that when they're having an issue, they are going to admit they have the issue, they're going to be on top of it, and they're going to fix it. And so we believe that this company, we believe in this company better. So that's the first piece. I think the second piece is sort of the obvious one, which is if you can train your middle leaders to be better people leaders, you get more capacity out of their teams. And if you can do that across a whole organization,
Yes.
you really elevate the whole organization in a way that is, I don't know, in my experience, often doesn't happen. Is often organizations kind of like get very often I find they get really, really dragged into the micromanaging, the details or whatever, which is a very sort of diminishing, low capacity mode to be. We can get into this capacity of we trust our people.
Right.
We know that they are trustworthy. We believe that they're going to get things done, and we're going to allow them the room to make mistakes and so forth, and really get those things, and really make the most of it. I think we'll find that organizations can be just tremendously more effective by training their people to train their people, to do more. And I think the last piece is about influence. I think, politics, and I'm sure you'll agree with this from your experiences, politics is sort of considered this weird sort of dirty word in the corporate environment. Politics is bad, but I don't agree with that view. My view is human beings have been doing, my joke is human beings have been doing politics since they were trying to get the choicest parts of the woolly mammoth. I mean, people have always been trying to do politics. It's part of the way human beings interact with each other. And so I think, the key is, how do you train an organization to influence each other and to think, put themselves in each other's shoes? And I actually think you can really train an organization to just be much more collaborative by actually admitting that politics are happening instead of pretending that they aren't going to happen. And so, so that's kind of my take. I have these I don't know if I've shared this with you because it's not in the book, but I have these 3 questions that I developed sort of after the book was sort of in the process of being published.
Okay.
And I'm convinced that if you got an organization to have all their people asking these 3 questions all the time, you would totally change a culture. And the first question is to ask your people constantly, what did you learn? And the second question is to ask your people, particularly people who are leaders of other people, is how did you grow your team? And the third one is to constantly be asking the question, who did you help?
Oh,
Right. So it's all about how did I learn? How do I make sure everybody else is learning? And how am I helping the organization at large to learn and grow and elevate itself? So that's my hope, is that this book will get into the hands of people and they will start to sort of ask those questions and train their middle leaders and get more out of the team, as opposed to doing what a lot of companies are doing right now. And they're saying, oh, these middle leaders, they don't really add any value. And I mean, you and I both know what happens is that, a couple of years later, that middle layer will grow back. That always
absolutely. First of all, thank you for sharing those 3 questions. I agree with them completely. But what I'm hearing when you revealed what they are, I'm hearing accountability.
Yeah.
I'm hearing accountability for the person, for themselves, and I'm hearing the accountability of the person for the organization. But I'm hearing it from the organization, that the organization needs to be accountable for getting leaders, if you will, people leaders, to be accountable for what they're doing, because they're not accountable. No one is minding the shop. They pay a lot of money for all of these development programs, which are almost always geared for leaders, senior leaders. They're already there.
Right.
And you know what? I just find that the parallel of college and your book so important. I'll tell you why. Because we take young people from high school and they go to college because we need to get them ready for the world. And then we put them in jobs so that they can hit the ground almost running. Well, the same thing what you're talking about. We bring in middle managers, but they're on their own. Right. They're not really being fully trained. They're not being trained to be effective, whether it's in leadership, whether it's in their middle management or their people skills. There's no effectiveness training. There's no people training. And I even said it in my book that I remember, oh my gosh, I've been trained on everything. I was the one, with the organization's pharmaceutical, sent away for a week, for a day, 2 days, whatever, and never once talked about the implementation of anything I learned. When you come back, you're on your own. Like my leaders never said anything about, like, what did you learn? How can you share that with everyone else? Because they didn't have an opportunity to go. And I just blew my mind. It blows my mind. I hope that every corporation has people watching this right now and listening to Jeff Sigel. Okay, so I know we're getting close to ending the podcast, but my question for you, again, is twofold. Everything that you know about writing your book, and of course, with your background and with your education, what should middle managers be? What should they be doing that they're not doing? And what should organizations? When I say an organization, I mean the company, but I also mean people in the higher level leadership positions. What should they be thinking that they're not thinking? What don't they know? You know what they don't know. What should they be thinking about to move forward so they can pivot and go in a direction that's different right now, based on what your book is about?
Yeah, I mean, to me, I think the number one thing I would say that middle managers need to do is to get out of what I call the achiever mindset and into a learner mindset. The achiever mindset is this sort of view that I am my degrees, my results, my titles, whereas the learner mindset is, I actually got where I got because I was open to learn. And this is what you were talking about, that college thing, etc. Is I didn't become a PhD chemist or something or I'm not, but or an accountant or whatever it is that people are. They didn't get there because of some diploma. It was all that hard work and learning. And I think the missing piece is what you were talking about before, is I can't learn to, or if I don't have an open mind to learning, how am I ever going to learn to be a leader? How am I ever going to learn to be great in this middle role? And I think, so I think for middle leaders, it's really about this idea of how do you get yourself out of this mindset where you're so worried about what's on your resume and more into the mindset of I'm going to build my resume by learning new things.
Right.
Not what was on my resume before, but what's going to be on it next. So that's number one. And then for organizations, I actually think it's sort of the flip side of that same coin, which is how do you get the organization into this mindset that says our whole goal here is to grow and help our people learn, right? We're going to create growth by helping our people become better, as opposed to this. I mean, it's so easy in the corporate world for things to become transactional. Like you see it in hiring, by the way, all the time, right? Where I'm going to hire the person that basically on paper has already done all the things that are part of their job. And I don't know about you, but I'm guessing you're going to agree with this. Is I would rather hire someone who is starting out from less experience but has a curious learner mindset than I would find somebody who knows how to quote do everything but doesn't want to learn anything because they're like, I'm good.
Right, because the former has no bad habits.
Right. Well, the former has no bad habits, number one, and number two is they're going to surpass that other person pretty quickly because all the things that we tend to hire people, like, do you know how to use this piece of software or whatever? Like, those are all things that you learn in like, a week or two. When you can't, what's harder to change is if somebody has gotten into this mindset of like, I'm good, I know what I'm doing, I don't need to learn anything. Once you're in that mindset, it's like, okay, I mean, you can do the job, but we're not going to get more out of you. We're going to get more out of you by really tapping into the potential of your brain, not the things that you can, do with, your hands on the keyboard.
Right. One big takeaway that I have from this podcast with you is that I think what wins the game is curiosity, because I'm looking at you, Jeff, as an example to all of us. You've got this stellar academic background in, I don't know, physics, math, organic chemistry. Am I forgetting something? Right?
Yep.
And then you were a teacher.
Yeah.
And then you go to not only being an author, but you've already written 2 novels. You published your 3rd book, which is actually your first published book, to the best of my knowledge. I mean, there's nothing connected, but the thread through that does bring it all together for you is your curiosity.
Absolutely.
And I do believe that middle managers, all middle managers should absolutely read your book for a lot of reasons, but because the way that you tell the stories makes total sense. It's not like, it's not like you're saying you should be here. You talk about what happened with you, what worked, what didn't work, what are the learning moments. That's what this is all about. And that's what your book is all about. Plus, and I put this actually in your review on Amazon, but I love things. And audience, when you buy Jeff's book, you need to read the book to understand what I'm about to say. But he has these great subheaders called, and Jeff, correct me if I'm wrong, we have to go to Chicago.
Yeah.
Right.
Sometimes you have to go to Chicago.
Sometimes you have to go to Chicago, which will become part of your acumen after you read his book. And what's the other one? Yeah, great.
Okay, great. Yeah.
Okay, great. Okay. And that one, you must read why he wrote about that. That is one of my favorites. So anyway, well, Jeff Sigel, you are just delightful in a million ways. And I'm so happy that you were able to join us. As I was saying to everyone, Jeff is going to be coming back in September with Greg Kaiser Sr., who was on my podcast, because combined, I think the total IQ of the two of them is like someone's rent. I don't know, something ridiculous. And you're all going to learn so much, because I know I do. I'm the luckiest girl to have these minds, the business mind, and access to these business minds. I'm really lucky, and I know that. So anyway, I wanted to thank Jeff so much. I also want to wish you all the best, my friend, with his book, The Middle Manners. And feel free to hold that up, Jeff. Don't be shy. This is why we have podcasts too. Great artwork, by the way. Okay, so as we are closing this podcast, I always like to remind people that life is short and careers are shorter. And the reason why people like Jeff and I exist and why we're writing books like these is to make your journey much easier and make better decisions than even we made. We know we've got the aerial view of what's out there. We are handing you some success on a silver platter with our books, because we're going to not just tell you why, but show you how, which is my philosophy in life, how to do that. Okay. And again, as I open up Releading, I'm going to end with the same thought, that it's all about when you pause. It's all about your self-awareness. If you're a leader and if you don't pause and take stock of yourself, you're not winning. You're not doing anyone a favor. Yourself, or even the team or the people that are influenced or are impacted by your skill set. This world is changing quick. Oh my gosh, it's going to be changing so much quicker. We need to keep up with that. So you should never be the same, right? But as far as us pausing and then deciding in which direction that we're going to go into, reading books like mine, reading books like Jeff's, that's how you're going to fortify your skill set so that you can pivot and keep going, but walk down maybe, a path that's right next to the path that you were on. Leave that one behind. Keep going, keep moving. Because when you keep going in your career, that's a good thing. But if you're not doing it with purpose, that's sometimes why we don't get promoted. So at the end of the day, when you focus your attention for yourself inward on your skill set, so that when you are impacting others, you're going to be using some of the information in books like The Middle Managers from Jeff Sigel. I hope you do, because it's just going to make your life and your career so much easier. So that being said, just go out there and keep releading, keep re-engaging, and keep your focus on the middle managers, because they indeed matter. And I do credit Jeff Sigel for being one of the founders of what I call the middle manager movement. It is long overdue, and you're in great hands with Jeff Sigel. So Jeff, I'm going to see you in September.
Yep.
Until then, my friends, thank you for joining us.
Thanks, Kim.